Let us pay our attention to Brother Nick.
Morning, everybody. Good morning. It's been a little while since I've done one of these. I actually think it wasn't probably until earlier this year, maybe, that I had done another one of these. So you're probably thinking one of two things right now. You're thinking, oh, great, Nick is back. We finally get to hear more encouraging stuff. Or you're thinking, oh, goodness, not this guy again. So, do you have any plans? I imagine that you probably do. I have plans. I like to plan out everything day by day, week by week, what I want to do, what I'm going to do, whether it be at work or at home. And so just as a little story, a couple of weeks ago, earlier this month, we got a series of, across all of Illinois and elsewhere, we got a series of pretty bad weather that had rolled on through. It was a lot of rain. You might have heard of it. There was a lot of tornadoes, a lot of hail. And if you know me, you know that I tend to be the type of guy who gets really nervous when weather comes about. Maybe that's because just when I was younger, I never did well with storms, or maybe just who I am as a person. I've never managed well with storms, but I tend to get pretty nervous, especially because of the rainfall. Because previously with our house tends to flood when it rains a lot. Now, at the time, though, earlier this month, I wasn't worried about it. I wasn't worried because in the past, we had some work done in the backyard, and we had some things done to the drains and whatnot around the house. And for a long time, we hadn't flooded downstairs. So I figured it wasn't going to happen again. So that on like a Thursday night, when it was really bad, when it was like coming down really fast and really hard, I wasn't too concerned because I thought it's fine. It's okay. We haven't flooded in a while. Nothing's going to happen. I'm good. I'll just go about my business as normal. Next thing you know, I hear yelling downstairs. And the sense of dread that came over me, it was as if someone told me that I was about to have a root canal in every single one of my teeth. Unfortunately, because it did rain so much so fast, the drain could not keep up. And so unfortunately, all the water flooded into the room, and we had to then rush to get the towels and the shop vac. And fortunately, thankfully, the rain did eventually stop, and we did have a plan for this. We do have a drain that sits on the outside of the house, so we could pump out all the water to the front. And we eventually were able to contain it enough to where it didn't spread into any of their rooms. But all things considered, I didn't sleep well that night. So the reason I mention this is because I was not prepared. It wasn't planned. I wasn't planning for the house to flood that night. I wasn't prepared for anything like that. And for any of you who know me well enough, you know that I like to plan. I love to plan. It's like takes up about 90% of my brain power just to plan for stuff. And it goes, again, day by day. I love to schedule. I have certain aspects of my day that I like to do at certain times of the day in the way that I do it. That's just how I've grown up over the years. That's how I operate. And that goes for most things, waking up at a specific time. I wake up at 5:10 to get ready to go to work. I think most people probably do that as well when they wake up at a specific time. But not just that, I get to work at a specific time. I clock in at a specific time. And I even eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner at specific times of the day. So I like to do things in a particular way, and I like to know what I'm doing at any given time so I can plan accordingly. And even when it comes to writing these talks up here, I like to plan. I've discovered that over the years, I write these on Friday and Saturday. And I do that because it helps me remember it for the next day. I have it up here, but at least all the words are written down in my head, and I have them in my head so I can bring them out to everyone here. So when I'm going up here, I know what I'm saying. By contrast, I detest being surprised. I don't like being caught off guard. I don't like things being unplanned. Again, such as with the flooding. I wasn't expecting the house to flood. It happened, and there's nothing I can do about that, but I wasn't any happier about it. But it's even just when I'm planning, when anything throws off my planning and my schedule, I just don't like it. It's not how I operate. I like to operate on a schedule and on a time. Thing is, though, is that I've also come to accept over the years that as I've gotten older and I've learned a lot more and I've possibly matured a lot more, strong emphasis on possibly, I've come to accept that I cannot plan for everything. That there are some things that are beyond my control, that I don't have the ability to prepare for, and that the best I can do is take them in good stride and push forward with whatever I have with the tools that God had given me. And all in all, the Bible makes it clear that planning in of itself is not a bad thing. I have two verses that usually come to mind. The first is in Isaiah chapter 32, verse 8. And I love this line. But he who is noble plans noble things, and on noble things he stands. And then likewise, later on in Proverbs 21, verse 5, the plans of the diligent shall surely lead to abundance, but everyone who is hasty only comes to poverty. So as I mentioned, I'd like to imagine that we all have plans. We probably have plans for what we're going to do later today, later tomorrow, later this week, next month, maybe even next year. But one thing I've had to ask myself is, what are my plans with God? Do I have plans to put God in my life? Do I make time to do things for the sake of God? Do I place enough emphasis on putting God more in my life? And I try my best to do that. I try to do what I can to pray every day just for strength to help me understand, to help me get through the day, to get all my work done, to help me do everything I need to do. But even in this case, God has plans for me. He has plans for all of us. And sometimes we don't understand that. Sometimes we can't understand that. We don't know what will happen in the next hour, in the next day, in the next week, or month, or year. Everything I have said up to this point has only been about here and now. What we can expect in that time frame. But no one can plan for every possible outcome. It was, and it still is, my hope that I would have been able to go to places to travel, to Italy and to Greece. And of course, as I've probably told many of you, I, above all else, want to go to Jerusalem. I desperately want to go. That is the one thing that I want to do before I leave this earth, before I fall asleep. I want to go to Jerusalem. And there were some preliminary plans to do that back in 2020, before a certain event unfortunately happened that made that not possible. But as I've experienced with these experiences, we can't prepare for everything. We should plan. We should have plans in place in case something happens, but we cannot plan for every possible outcome. We can only know what is here and now and plan to the best of our ability, but there comes an acceptance that everything belongs to the Lord, and he decrees what he wills. So I often think of this. I remember in James chapter 4, 13 to 15, James is writing to others, and he says, "Come now, you who say, 'Today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit.' Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are but a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. Again, I cannot know everything. As much as I would love to plan for every single possible outcome in my life, that's just not possible. So the best thing that I can do, and something that I have been training myself to do a lot, is just as like it was in the hymn, take it to the Lord in prayer. Whenever I'm struggling, whenever my plans don't go as I expect, I try and pray about it. I pray that whatever else may happen, whether good or bad, that in the end it might still be benefited to my use. I say that as the Lord wills, I ask him and I pray, if you will it, then my plans may be established and help me to live better towards serving you. For we know that the Lord is the one who establishes what he wills. As it's said in Proverbs 16, verse 9, the heart of man plans his way, but it is the Lord that establishes his steps. And likewise, we know, of course, as I've said, that God has plans for us. Plans for our benefit, plans to our use. And there were two stories in the Bible that always came to mind when I was writing this talk. And the first is the book of Esther. And I won't go too in-depth into Esther, since I imagine most everyone here is familiar with the story. But I like to see how there is sort of this contrast between Haman and Esther and their planning on how to handle what they want to do. Haman had planned to have Mordecai and all the Jews within the empire executed. That was his plan. That was what he had desired, what he had wanted. Unexpected and horrific as these are, Esther and Mordecai also developed a plan to rescue their people, showing remarkable bravery and courage by taking risk to appeal to the king, despite knowing that appearing before the king uninvited would be a death sentence. Despite knowing this, Esther says in Esther 4:15-17, she tells Mordecai, "Go and gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf. And do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, then I perish." And Mordecai had went away and did everything that Esther had ordered him. And here is this remarkable show of faith, that it's a plan, of course, but it's also a plan to be placing trust in God. That even though she knows, she is aware that she might die from all this experience, she nevertheless places trust in God, that he has a plan that through her, he will rescue his people from destruction. And interestingly, God is not mentioned once in Esther, not even once, not even in passing. And yet, we can see that throughout the story, you can see him working. You can see him working in the background, making his plan work, his plan fulfilled. Was it coincidence that there happened to be a plot against the king, and that it just so happened that it was Mordecai who uncovered the plot and saved the king's life? Then later on, was it coincidence that the king had been unable to sleep, and that he had asked the records be brought out to him that had mentioned Mordecai saving his life? Was it coincidence that the king had Mordecai honored? And was it there that through Esther, that Esther revealed that she was a Jew as well, and that in her appeal, the king grew angry at Haman for having deceived him in such a manner against the man who had saved his life, and that in turn, instead, it undid everything that Haman had planned for. We may not see how God works in the background of our lives. We may not notice it right away. It could be many years before we look back on something and say, he was working there. He was with me that whole time. I just couldn't see it. And yet he is. God has a plan for us, plans to establish us, and plans to uphold us and to protect us, that through him, placing our faith in him, we know that he will watch over us and keep us safe. And likewise, the second story I was reminded of is an interesting one. It's the parable of the rich fool, which Jesus had spoke to the crowd in Luke chapter 12, verses 16 to 21. Jesus is speaking to a crowd, and he told them a parable, saying, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, 'What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' And he said, 'I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store my grain and my goods, and I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul is required of you. And these things that you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God.'" Now, to me, the way I've always interpreted this story is that it has two layers to it. One, of course, is a warning about greed, about guarding up so much wealth for yourself. For what good will it do you? How will you know that you will be here in 10 years or even 5? As I said before, we do not know the day or the hour when we will close our eyes and we will not open them again until that day when the kingdom comes. But to me, there was also another layer to this, and it was about more towards myself, a reminder to not be too focused on planning for this life, about what tomorrow will bring, about where I will be in 10 or 20 years, that my focus is also to be on the future, to be towards God, to know his commandments and to know what he has told me, to be prepared for that day when Jesus will return. For as Jesus himself said, man does not know the day or the hour when he will return, not even the Son of Man himself, but that only God knows the day and the hour when Jesus will return. So later in the chapter, Jesus tells us, instead, in 31 to 34, instead, seek his kingdom, and these things will be added to you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the needy. Provide yourself with money bags that do not grow old, with treasures in heaven that do not fail, where no thief approaches and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And truly, that is our greatest hope and our desire. That future that is planned, that we plan and is planned for us, the day when our Savior and our King returns to establish his long-awaited kingdom. The bridegroom approaches, and it is our plan to stay awake for that hour and prepare. We do not know the day or the hour, but we should not come unprepared. We should not be caught off guard. And so, brothers and sisters, though some plans in our lives may work out for the best, and sometimes they may not, there is a plan that we have for us, that the Lord has given to us. And it will end with verses 35 to 40. Stay dressed for action and keep your lamps burning, and be like men who are waiting for their master to come home from the wedding feast, so that the door may be open to him when he comes and knocks. Blessed are those servants whom the master finds awake when he comes. For truly I say to you, he will dress himself for service and have them recline at the table. He will come and serve them, And if he comes in the second watch and in the third and finds them awake, blessed are those servants. But know this, that if the master of the house had known the hour by which the thief was coming, he would not have left his house to be broken into. Therefore yourselves must also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not expect."